comms manager at Greater Sport GM Moving, and one of the comms managers, part of the team over in the marketing team, and been really kind of holding the ring around the delivery of the two campaigns, so that counts, and then the walking campaign. So Diva Creative, so we're going to introduce you in a minute to Gareth and Natalie, and I think Jen's also presenting as well, who are a single agency. So whereas with That Counts, we had a consortium of agencies that kind of delivered the campaign. With Walking, it's a single agency that have kind of done all of the media buying and the creative work, and actually the research as well, handled the research through the agency. So it will be kind of one presentation that covers both parts of what we've just done in the first session. So the channel performance, and then some of the tracking awareness kind of the campaign. So a little bit different with the Walking campaign, because it was never planned to run in phases particularly. So although there is a small amount of activity coming out next year, which we'll cover towards the end of the presentation, but it was one continuous burst of activity that was due to run from the end of March to the end of July. And I know, for anyone who was with us when we did the face-to-face session in February, people have met Gareth and Natalie because they came in to present the creative work, kind of almost like an unveil and a launch of the campaign. And then obviously sadly it was hit by COVID and had to be replanned. But yeah, so without much further ado, I will hand over to Gareth, who's going to take you through the first part of the presentation. I think you're handing over to Natalie. We've got another Natalie and then Jen as well. So the same applies if anyone's got any questions. There hopefully is time at the end. We've planned about 15 minutes. But yeah, if you've got any questions, just drop them into the chat box. Keep an eye on that and we'll try to pick those up. Okay, lovely. Are you ready, Gareth?
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks. It's actually Nat who's gonna start us off. So I shall hand over to her.
Oh.
Call me when you need me to drive the slides, Nat.
Yep, that's fine. Yeah, so I'm Nat. I'm one of the account directors at Diva, and as Helen Louise said, we're leading on the GM Walking campaign. And once again, thanks everyone for taking the time to listen to us today. So really today we're just going to give everyone an overview of the campaign for phase one. As everyone has touched on, coronavirus really had an impact on our campaign. We were actually due to launch, I think it was the week we all went into national lockdown. So obviously we had to do some last minute changes and deferrals, but the campaign itself finally launched in August, and the end of phase one come to an end in October. And we've now got a slightly smaller phase two planned for relaunch in March next year, which we'll come on to at the end. But today we wanted to start with a bit of a recap of the campaign, because obviously when we saw everyone last, I think we were just in that process of rolling things out. So there's a few more elements to it now. So we're going to go through some of the creatives and then go through a bit more detail around the channel results and the tracking research from this phase as well. And then, yeah, happy to answer any questions at the end. If you pop them in the chat as we go. So do you want to jump onto the next slide, Gareth? So, as I'm sure many of you are aware of the Great Manchester Walking campaign, but we wanted to begin with just a bit of a recap of the overall ambitions and aims of the concept itself before talking through some of the results. So as you'll remember, the campaign itself was developed off the back of the insights that for most people, walking was one of the most accessible forms of being physically active. But for us, we really wanted to focus on connecting people with the idea that walking has a lot more to offer than simply being active. And, for most people, walking is so much more than that. It is about headspace and it's about peace in a busy world. It was about time spent connecting with nature and people in their community. And for a lot of people, it gives them that precious family time as well. So we wanted to really encourage people to find their own personal reasons for walking more. And for us, it was really important that the campaign itself felt attainable, but also we know there was a lot of other work going on around GM walking, and ultimately it needed to be backed by this greater ambition. So it's not only about helping people make their first step into being more active, but also feeding into that wider ambition of GM becoming the first walking city region as well. So there's a lot more to it than just simply walking. And then the next slide, please, Gareth. So For us, the campaign's core concept really was centered around our walking stories. So we wanted to show the real reasons that people walk, but we also wanted to elevate some of these benefits to bring a bit of poetry into everyday lives and journeys. And that's what we really focused on. And for us, we thought it was really important to use the real people across Greater Manchester who were already benefiting from walking by telling their experiences to help encourage and inspire people across Greater Manchester to discover their own ways and see where it takes them. So I'm going to hand you over to Gareth, who is going to talk you through some more of the kind of creative that we developed, and then onto the media results as well.
Yeah, thanks, Nat. Just double checking I'm not muted, but I'm all good. So I'm just going to run through a bit of an overview of the creative that was used throughout the campaign, and then I'm going to discuss some of the results from the different channels, and within that, Jen's going to talk to us about the results from social and search, since that's certainly very much her domain. So, out of home was originally was planned to give, a lot of broad coverage across Greater Manchester, and particularly in sort of busy town centres where there's footfall. We're not going to continue to mention the impact of COVID on the media landscape and everything else that it's touched this year. But obviously we shifted that slightly, in light of the COVID situation, to give a bit more coverage in some of the residential areas and things like that. So we had sort of two sort of streams of out of home creative. One is sort of generic version, which by which I mean, it was just a sort of standard version. I don't mean that disparagingly in any way. It was lovely. So we had a generic version that really sort of brought to life the key campaign messages, things like a good stroll's good for your northern soul, which were then echoed across other channels and other creatives. And then alongside, and that generic creative formed the kind of bulk of the out of home activity. And then alongside that, we had the case study creative, and these were much fewer, but they were, where possible, we essentially put up a few out of home sites, large formats in the area where the person featuring in the case study lived, or perhaps somewhere where they'd mentioned on their walk as part of their story, and obviously these had these beautiful huge illustration portraits to just kind of really bring to life the stories of those people who featured as case studies, and sort of put them front and center. And actually, one of our case studies, Phil, did in fact manage to get a picture of himself and his walking group in front of his billboard, so that was good. I think he may have been the only one, but that was it was very pleasing, and obviously a slightly surreal experience for him to be stood in front of a sort of 20-foot image of his face. But I think he enjoyed it. So that was the out of home. So we also had sort of TV, video on demand, and radio as sort of high impact visual centerpiece of the campaign, and within that in particular we had the Greater Manchester Way film, which was used as a television ad, and the voiceover was also used as the radio advert, which played out across Greater Manchester. So we'd originally planned to use that film just on ITV on demand, but again, changing media landscape, COVID, we added in additional video on demand in the form of 4OD before the campaign eventually launched in August. So we had a lot of really positive comments from people about the pre-production animatic version of the TV ad before we'd actually made it and before the campaign launched. So hopefully some of you who out there who are in the region saw the ad itself and were equally impressed with the final product. But for anyone who didn't, and for those who enjoyed the animatic first time round, and I'm going to just play the TV ad now, and hopefully you'll be equally impressed with the final product. So I'll just run that now. Hopefully the sound comes through okay.
This is where we walk, strutting our stuff to fill our lungs, clear our heads, or just get home back in our beds. A good stroll's good for your northern soul. We all know it, even if other places don't get it. You see, round here, we just get out and walk. So let's do it more from now on. Whenever, wherever, find your way and see where it takes you. So just step ahead, stretch your legs, stride on, because that's the Greater Manchester way. Find local walking groups, routes and inspiration at gmwalking.co.uk.
There we go. So hopefully anyone who appreciated the animatic enjoyed that as well. But it was very much the sort of creative centerpiece of the campaign. An opportunity to showcase a few areas across Greater Manchester and the sort of diversity of the population and to try to showcase again the sort of diversity of walking that we're talking to when we're talking to people through this campaign. And then obviously alongside the main TV ad, we had a range of case story videos which featured on social and online. So mentioning social, primarily we used the case study creative, so the videos and then some short cut down versions of those to as the main creative on social media to try to inspire people to action and to drive awareness of the campaign. And obviously again, we given the context of people being at home and things like that, we knew that social was going to be a good avenue for reaching people. And then obviously using the kind of profiles of the case studies and their stories, we sort of developed a bit of a targeting strategy around that to really sort of increase the effectiveness of those ads when they were served to people, which we'll cover in a little more detail shortly. So just to touch on the media, what actually happened as part of the campaign. So eventually, as we've said, we eventually launched on August the 10th with a significant initial burst of activity across all of the channels throughout August, and then ITV On Demand, social and search all continued to deliver for the remainder of the first phase, which ran up until the end of October. As Nat mentioned and Heloise mentioned, we'd always intended to have a sort of initial big burst of activity, and that was always the plan, and that didn't change in light of the COVID situation. But we actually felt it was even more important when we were looking at a relaunch in October to make as much noise as possible with the campaign at the beginning. While the weather was nice, while walking was likely to be more appealing to people, this was the reason why we originally intended to launch the campaign in March and run through till mid to late summer. And as well, there was other activity from that count, and the wonderfully reimagined walking festival that had to take place. So we really amplified that noise in those first 4 weeks, and then sort of kept that momentum going throughout September and October. And again, it's obviously the COVID impacted the intended delivery of the campaign. It got shifted by several months, and the media landscape that it launched into was obviously much changed. But we also, in running the, we did a lot of work with the social channels for GM Walking throughout the summer, and obviously we were still working on, thinking about the campaign and how it might relaunch. And we encountered a lot of positive sentiment around walking from people on social channels and just anecdotally, because walking was an activity that people could still do. It was an activity that people were being encouraged to do elsewhere, and people were discovering. And people were taking some solace, in some cases in walking, particularly in Greater Manchester, where you guys had both kind of various and varied lockdowns that were going on. It was an activity that people could still do, and we wanted to support that and encourage it and sort of capitalize on that momentum. In fact, I noticed interestingly that one of the quotes in Donald's presentation was from someone who said, I've done more walking but less of other activities. So it was that kind of that momentum that we were hoping to capitalize on when we launched, and we think we did. So just some headline sort of performance figures. So overall, we've been really pleased with the performance of the campaign in its first phase. We think it's performed really well. We've been really pleased with some of the results that have come out. We've got a few of those headline results here. In particular, the level of engagement on social media, we felt showed that the case study stories some of the case study stories in particular were really resonating with people, especially those that had an element of sort of mental health to them. John's case story in particular, you know, John was very very ardent in his belief that that walking was fantastic for his mental health, you know, as somebody who'd suffered with multiple mental health issues in the past. And Chloe, who ultimately we were originally going to be filming a case study video with her, but because she has sort of multiple health issues, we, you know, with the situation with the coronavirus, we were, you know, we didn't want to put her at any risk. So in the end, we had to record a voiceover and we animated over it. And I think in some ways that's been even more powerful for people. You know, her story very much resolved around using walking to address, you know, her own mental health. So, you know, and some of the engagement that came through, we thought showed that people were identifying with some of those stories, that, you know, they were resonating with them. You know, and over 60,000 clicks to the website. You know, the promise that much of the campaign creative offered to people or gave to people was, you know, groups, roots, and inspiration, and that's where we drove people through to the website to deliver on that promise. So I'll go into a little bit more detail now around how some of the various channels performed. So out of home, as we've said, you know, a range of sort of 6 and 48 sheets across Greater Manchester, with a handful of them featuring the case study creative. So, you know, the sites that we ended up running with had a sort of an impact score of you know, over 8 million. You know, and really, as the guys from Republic of Media said, this was really the kind of one of the big awareness raising arms of the campaign. You know, big, you know, as you can see from the presentation and from some of the examples of the creative that have come before, you know, colourful, visually striking creative that, you know, to hopefully kind of stop people in their tracks. And I'm sure Jen will mention shortly when we cover search, you know, something that we think is lending some evidence to the impact of some of that activity is you know, some of the ad groups that people were searching for on Google. You know, we feel like there was a good amount of search happening directly for the campaign. So TV, video on demand, and radio, again, it was very much awareness raising. You know, this is about sort of high impact visual and audio impressions. So, you know, those were delivered. You know, over 500,000 impressions on ITV and 4OD combined. And the thing that again we were really pleased with on this front was clicks from video on demand. You know, it's not usually a medium where people will click on an advert, you know, particularly depending on the device they're watching on. So we were pleased with that, you know, as a bonus almost, that video on demand was also driving traffic to the website as well as delivering the high impact impressions that we were looking for. So I'll change this slide and I'll hand over to Jen, who's going to cover social and search for us now.
Thanks, Gareth. I'm Jen, for those of you who don't know me. I'm one of the account managers at Diva, and I had the pleasure of running the digital advertising campaign on social and search for the GMWay campaign. I'll keep it brief, hopefully, in terms of the results, but yeah, if you have any questions, as always, ask them at the end. Like Gareth said, social media was a key channel for the GMWay campaign, and we advertised across Facebook, Snapchat, and YouTube. As you can see from the slide, I think we were able to reach, you know, an enormous number of people through these channels. But that's the relatively easy bit. But I think what we're really proud of is the level of engagement that the adverts achieved. And the results show that people, you know, they weren't just seeing our adverts come up on their timeline and scrolling on by. They were stopping to watch the videos, they were interacting with the posts, and ultimately, you know, they were clicking through to the website for more information. Social, in fact, actually accounted for quite a large proportion of that 60,000 or so, you know, visitors to the website. And what you don't see on here is the click-through rate of the adverts, which is the percentage of people who click on an advert to go to the website. Highlighting Facebook, we achieved a click-through rate of just under 1.5% overall. Now, this is well above the channel average, which is 0.9%. And some of the adverts, in fact, you know, achieved 2% and over, which is just, you know, huge, and I think a big testament to how powerful those stories were. You can see a massive number of video plays listed here, and these are actually just people who watched the full video all the way through. And we also received 500,000 people sort of just watching part of the video. I think what it shows, you know, by having so many people watching the full thing, is just how engaging those stories were. You know, they weren't just watching a little bit and going away, they were sitting through it, they were watching it and engaging with it. And I think a big part of our strategy, which has sort of paid dividends and you know, helped us to achieve these results, is that highly targeted approach that Gareth touched upon. You know, not only segmenting the audiences, but also our case studies were sort of cut into sort of bite-sized chunks related to sort of very specific parts of walking, whether that's mental health, the community aspect, or just exploring your local surroundings. We were very clear in our messaging. We were clear in what we want people to take away, and sort of deliberate in what we were saying and how we were saying it and who we were saying it to. And so, you know, by cutting those videos up and releasing snippets at a time, we were able to keep things interesting and engaging all the way through. You know, we didn't see engagement sort of spike at the top and then, you know, gradually decrease. We were able to keep that momentum going, and by releasing new videos and things, we kept it engaging all the way through. Speaking of engagements, if you see on the next slide, we achieved over 5,000 engagements on Facebook. So this is likes, comments, shares, saves, reactions. So that's not including all the vast number of clicks that we received. And we were really sort of overwhelmed really by the number of comments and conversations that the adverts did spark. You can see a small selection of the over 200 comments that we did receive on this slide. All the comments weren't all good, obviously, but the majority of them were. And I think what really shows is for every negative comment that we got, we'd get multiple people coming in and, you know, offering a positive response or an encouragement to these comments. So it really felt like we'd got that community spirit. You know, it wasn't us, you know, telling people to go out walking. It was the community of Greater Manchester coming together and saying, no, you can do it, you know, addressing people's concerns and really, you know, helping each other really, which I think that was the really powerful thing with what we've achieved here. We also had 855 shares of the posts on Facebook. Again, it just demonstrates that people were sharing, they were supporting, they were encouraging each other to get walking. You know, it wasn't just us, you know, pushing those adverts out with the paid stuff. It was, we were getting lots of organic reach as well. And I think one sort of personal thing that I would say is, in all the sort of many social media campaigns that I've run, I think this one really is up there in terms of engagement, which I hope counts for something. But moving on to search, so we ran a series of adverts on search. We captured quite a broad spectrum of people within the strategy. So we were targeting those who were looking for GM Walking brand names and terms associated with the campaign, and you can just see there from the results that people did know about the campaign, they were searching for it, and they were, you know, clicking through and wanting to know more, which I think it's one of the benefits of having such a multi sort of pronged kind of campaign, where you get someone seeing a billboard and seeing lots of different touch points and then coming ultimately to come to the website and find out more. But we also targeted people interested in walking routes and groups, and also people looking for some way to improve their mental and physical health, for which obviously we could propose walking as one of those. It won't come to any surprise for anyone, but 90% of internet users use Google search, and there are around 40,000 searches on the platform every second. But I think what the results show for this campaign was just how important it was under the COVID landscape to have the GM Way message on search. So for a bit of context, walking as a topic on Google search reached its 5-year peak in May of 2020. So that's in terms of people looking for walking related topics, and a peak in search volume. So more people were searching for walking related terms, you know, obviously exacerbated by the closing of gyms, the limits on people's movements, daily walks being promoted. And this increase in appetite was reflected in our results as well. So we received over 100,000 impressions, which was double what we'd projected. And so it just shows, you know, how important that channel was and how engaged people were with not only walking in general, but the campaign as well. And just finally, we look always to click-through rate to evaluate success, and we were again overwhelmed with the results that we achieved here too. The average click-through rate on Google search is around 3.17%, sorry. So this was a target that we absolutely smashed. We trebled that at over 9% overall, and even, you know, more so in things like our brand terms and the groups and routes ads that we'd put up there. Why I think it worked so well was because, you know, we were relevant with our adverts. You know, we satisfied what people were searching for, but we also created engaging and compelling, you know, adverts that people did want to click on. So yeah, I think hopefully overall you'll agree with the search and the social that we did, you know, achieve some really great results. I think that's all I have to say on that, so I won't take up any more of your time, and I'll pass you back on to Gareth, I believe, who's going to talk about what this ultimately sort of means in terms of the tracking research and next steps. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I think just to really briefly reflect on that, because it was one of the results that really astounded me, was the results from the brand ad group. You know, whilst they look like numbers on a page, that ad group was set up to serve ads to people who were specifically searching for the campaign name and elements of the campaign brand. So the fact that those ads were, you know, those keywords were searched for over 3,000 times suggests that, you know, those people were looking for our campaign, and that over half of them then clicked through, you know, suggests that they really genuinely were looking for our campaign and found what they were looking for. So, you know, I think that does, you know, it helps to support the impact perhaps of some of those high impact but kind of quite difficult to measure channels like TV and like out of home. You know, people were aware of the campaign, people did know about it, and they were trying to find it. So I think, yeah, that's certainly one that sort of really astounded me, and we were really pleased with. So yeah, so just for a final few slides. So obviously, alongside all of the wider evaluation work that's taking place of all of the activity, we worked with another agency to implement a tracking survey for the walking campaign to track awareness of it and attitudes and behaviours around walking. So I'm just going to pull out a couple of key results from that, from the recent post-campaign survey to just run through here. So in terms of awareness, sort of probably the most striking result was the increase in respondents saying unprompted that they'd seen adverts encouraging people to walk more. So that went from 34% of respondents, and I should say for Donald and Tim, if you're still out there, this is a sample size of about 500, slightly over, broadly representative of Greater Manchester. So yeah, so that went from 34% to 60%, which was obviously a pretty dramatic increase there. And recall as well, obviously, it was something that Donald mentioned in presentation, you know, quite a lot. And again, we were really pleased with the recall results that came out there. So, you know, when people were shown some of the specific campaign creative, 1 in 3 saying they recalled the radio advert. And then about 1 in 10 saying they recalled the TV and out-of-home ads. So again, just really positive numbers in terms of recall, you know, lending a bit more on the people saw the campaign, people remembered it, people sort of took it on board. So just in terms of attitudes and behaviours. Yeah, we had a series of questions that asked people to respond, you know, to agree or disagree with a range of statements about walking, and positive responses to that range of statements increased across the board. You know, there was an increase in positive responses to all of the statements related to walking, but in particular with some key statements which included things like walking is a fun way to exercise, walking is something I enjoy, it's easy, pleasant and safe to walk around where I live. You know, some of the things that we were sort of hoping to communicate really through the campaign. And as well as seeing, hopefully a change in attitudes towards walking, the reported walking behaviours from the people surveyed showed an increase as well. So the number of people, or the percentage of respondents saying that they walked most days of the week or a few times a week increased, and only a small increase, but an increase all the same. And the average number of minutes walked each week, but people reported increased by around 5 minutes, which is, excuse me, that shouldn't have a percentage sign on, but so that's minutes. So from 46.3 minutes to 51.4 minutes. So some positive results from the tracking research. We're scheduled to have another final wave of research in when the final phase of activity happens. So, just again, some positive results that support some of the conclusions that we've drawn from the results from the channels themselves. So just finally, I'm just going to say, excuse me, a few words about what's next for the Greater Manchester Way. Next steps. That's a very good pun. I didn't even notice that. So as we said, we never really intended to have a phase 2, but we do now. So that's excellent. So phase 1 related. So phase 2 of the campaign will be launching in March 2021 and will be running for the whole of that month. So that the full range of channels will be running again with a nice big sort of high profile burst of out of home and TV and video on demand happening in the first couple of weeks. We've got a couple of new case studies which some of you may have seen appearing on the website, but those will feature in paid social and in out of home. We'll have a new billboard to go up. So of course we'll urge everyone again nearer the time to keep their eyes peeled for the campaign creative, to share and support wherever you can. And we're really grateful to anyone who did so in phase 1. So we just thought I'd end with a few lines from one of our wonderful case studies, John. And it was those case studies really who helped to bring the walking stories concept to life. Without the stories that John and actually lots of people shared with us about walking and what it means to them, we wouldn't have really had a campaign. So although none of them are here, we would obviously like to extend our thanks greatly to them, and they've all been wonderful. So yeah, thank you very much. And if there's any questions, we're happy to answer them.